Slave owners were more cruel than kind to their slaves, but the idea was to make the slaves know that they were not free and that the master had all control over them. Usually the slaves working in the fields were beaten more often than the slaves working in the house. The main idea was to make slaves live in fear. Master flew into terrible passion and ordered the poor creature to be stripped naked, notwithstanding her pregnancy, and to be tied up to a tree in the yard. He then flogged her as hard as he could lick, both whip and cowskin, till she was all streaming with blood. He retired, and then hit her again and again. Her shrieks were terrible. Josiah Henson and Millie Evans were some of the few slaves that were treated with respect rather than cruelty. This was because either they were extremely good at work and determined to make the owner happy, or the owners thought slaves were just as equal as whites. Owners who were usually nice to slaves thought of them as family or felt a connection towards them. The types of punishment slaves received varies. Sometimes they punished them by loss of certain privileges. House slaves would be sent to the fields, holidays were taken away, and confinement was another option. Isolating a slave for many hours, usually their free time, with nothing to do or no one to talk to, surprisingly worked. The most common method of punishment was by beating them. On plantations, slaves had to build their houses if not provided with one. Slaves often tried to build houses similar to the ones they had in Africa, with thatched roofs. Slaves that worked in a plantation house usually had access to better housing and food. Houses sometimes could fit up to 10 slaves, cramped up. We entered some Negroes' huts, for their habitations cannot be called houses. They are far more miserable than the poorest of the cottage of our peasants. Slaves usually had to make everything, including pots and pans, to cook. Some used a hollow pumpkin shell called kalalash. Owners didn't spend more money than they had to for slaves. Their diet was usually cornbread and fatty meats. Slaves had very few clothes. They were given 1 pair of shoes and 3 undergarments to wear for a year. They didn't fit well and they were made of coarse materials. Most slaves worked from sunrise to sunset. Some had a free day on Sunday to go to church, but if they were not going to church, they spent their time relaxing. Some slaves had a once-a-month break or none at all.